You were born screaming on a backwater agri world where the biggest threat was drought and the occasional crop failure. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone's name and nobody locked their doors because what was there to steal besides bad grain and borrowed hope? Your parents died when you were 6 in a pirate raid, the kind of random violence that hits backwater worlds when someone with guns decides your planet looks undefended enough. The village raised you after because that's what communities did when a child had nowhere else to go. You had your own little group too. Kale taught you to fight with sticks and told you stories about being brave. Mira made you laugh when the nightmares came, when you'd wake up crying about faces you couldn't quite remember anymore. Tomos followed you everywhere like a devoted shadow, calling you his best friend before he even knew what that meant. Then the vision started. Actual visions, not dreams or intuition or lucky guesses. You'd see tomorrow's storm 3 days early, next week's accident while eating breakfast, that collapsing barn before it collapsed with just enough time to pull the livestock out. At first people called it luck, then instinct, then they started noticing patterns that made them nervous. You learned fast that survival meant hiding it. Growing up, you'd heard stories about psychers, people born with warp powers, who could see futures or move things with their minds. The stories always ended the same way. Psychers attracted demons, and demons killed everyone nearby. So you pretended to be observant, studied weather patterns obsessively, made lucky guesses based on careful analysis that kept you 3 steps ahead without anyone noticing the steps. Because if people knew what you were, they'd either kill you themselves or wait for something worse to do it for them. At 14, the vision came that changed everything. Warp-tainted storm with purple lightning. Your village wouldn't survive it. You saw that clearly, saw everyone you loved torn apart by something that wasn't just weather anymore. So you stopped hiding. You didn't know what you were doing, just instinct and desperation and stubborn refusal to let them die. Stood in the field alone and reached out with everything you had. Felt the storm's anger like a living thing pressing against your mind. It worked. The storm veered away and the village lived. You collapsed in the mud, unconscious for 3 days, and created a psychic flare bright enough to be seen from orbit by anyone with the right sensors. 3 days after you woke up, they arrived. Agents of the Imperium's black ships, vessels that travel the galaxy hunting for psychers. Black ships collect psychic children for the Emperor, either to feel his throne on Terra or to be trained as weapons. One crew member looked at you with red eyes behind a hood and didn't blink for the entire conversation. He tested you with a touch that felt like your mind getting examined like cargo at a checkpoint. You passed the inspection. He spoke to the village elder quietly while you stood there pretending not to understand. The translation was simple enough though. Unbound psychers attract war predators. We can protect your people, but only if the source is removed. They didn't want you for the Emperor's throne. You were too strong, too useful for something else. Special training was all they said, which sounded official until you noticed how carefully they didn't call it optional. You looked at Kale, at Mira, at Tomos, at the village that raised you when you had nothing. The math was simple and brutal. You leave or everyone dies with something far worse than a storm shows up. You said you'd go. Kale gripped your shoulder hard enough to bruise but didn't know what to say. Mira cried and made you a necklace from scrap wire and a purity charm from local tradition. Nothing fancy, just something to remember them by. She begged you to come back and you promised because what else could you do? Tomos made you promise out loud 3 times with a pinky promise, like that would make it more likely to actually happen. You promised, you meant it, and it was probably the only time you wished your visions had warned you. The black ship had restraint cells on the lower decks. Other psychers inside, young and terrified and chained like cargo. You understood immediately that this wasn't training, this was collection. They searched everyone before departure. Possessions destroyed under purity protocols that didn't allow for sentiment or exceptions. You thought fast, feigned a psychic episode with seizure symptoms that warp proximity causes in untrained minds. In the connection, you noticed the ship rat, but this one was clever with eyes too aware from warp exposure. You reached out with just a flicker of psychic contact and created a bond, unconscious and instinctive, then hid the necklace in its nest deep in ventilation shafts where nobody bothered looking. The rat felt your imprint and guarded it. You thought you were clever enough to hide it and get it later, not knowing you'd never see it the same way again. The ship didn't go to Terra like they told the village. It went to Titan, Saturn's moon, where a secret fortress existed that most of the Imperium didn't know about. A place that trained the Grey Knights, demon hunters, so classified that even other space marines thought they were myths. The ship entered the warp and you watched the stars disappear through the viewport. But you know what's better than getting drafted into someone else's war? Running your own. Which brings us to today's sponsor, Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. You know what they say, if you can't beat 'em, command 'em. So Tacticus is turn-based strategy on mobile. You've got 120 plus champions across 21 factions, Space Marines, Necrons, Chaos, Eldari, basically the whole 41st millennium, and the Hex grid does not forgive lazy plays. I mean, look, you can absolutely just charge forward yelling for the Emperor. You will also absolutely lose. Every fight comes down to where you're standing when you use your abilities, and whether you remembered which units counter what. Because the game will absolutely punish you for sending a melee unit into a sniper's line of sight when you had 3 better options. Right now, Tacticus is celebrating Warhammer Skulls with a Dawn of War 4 collaboration, which, if you're a Warhammer fan, is genuinely the crossover of the year. 2 new champions are dropping. Cyrus, captain of the Blood Ravens chapter, an assassin who lays haywire mines and strikes from the shadows. And Thothmek, a Necron chronomancer who bends time to suppress enemies and shield allies. The Skulls event also brings a brand new survival mode called The Last Stand, starting May 24th, where you hold the line against endless enemy waves with Cyrus at the front. And then on May 28th, there's a 2-week campaign event pitting the Necrons against the Dark Angels, with Lionel Johnson himself as the final legendary boss. So if you want to check it out, download Tacticus free using my link below or scan the QR code on screen and use code GAMEFORTACTICUS to grab 50 Blackstones, 3,000 gold, and 10 shards of Marnius Calgar. Code's valid until June 22nd. Alright, back to Titan. The Black Ship docked at Titan. They separated you from the other Psychers. Those went to holding cells for processing. You went somewhere else. A Grey Knight in silver armor gestured you forward toward the chapter's fortress. The fortress monastery was void, cold, and absolute, the kind of architecture that made you feel small just by existing near it. They stripped you of everything, all possessions destroyed, and cataloged as impure materials. You touched the empty space on your neck. Good thing you hit it on the ship. Otherwise, it'd be ash now. They sent you to the Chamber of Trials with 30 other selected Psychers. Pass, and you become a Grey Knight. Fail, and you disappear. Run, and you also disappear, just faster. They shot 3 aspirants the first night for trying, made everyone watch. The only exit is through the trials or through a bolt round. 99% failure rate, though they didn't mention that up front, but you figured it out when aspirants started disappearing. Great recruitment pitch, should have led with that. You made it through by being smarter than the pain, predicting tests before they started, analyzing patterns that kept you alive. That cleverness saved you, the same cleverness that hid your powers for years. Then, the 666 rituals began, and cleverness stopped mattering. They strapped you to a medical slab in the Sanctum of Purity. Hypno-indoctrination that rewrote your thoughts during forced sleep. Psychic surgery with prognosticars. Grey Knight Psychers who could see possible futures, who carved through your mind to erase the timelines where you failed. Memory extraction that pulled everything out piece by piece while you were conscious and couldn't move. You tried to resist, built walls in your mind, safe rooms for the important things, locked away names and faces and repeated them like prayers. The prognosticars found your walls immediately, tore them down with psychic force. Week 1 in the Sanctum, couldn't remember the village name during a memory test. Month 3 in the combat cages, couldn't remember their faces anymore, just 3 people. Month 6 in psychic conditioning, couldn't remember why 3 mattered. Year 1 after final trials, couldn't remember if there was anything to remember. They burned those memories, left only the path where you survive and never fall. What remained was just instinct. Your problem solving became combat tactics. That protective urge became anti-demon zeal. Nothing conscious left to exploit. Years of surgeries and gene seed implantation and combat drills. They implanted the Emperor's gene seed, not a Primarch's like other Space Marine chapters received from their genetic fathers, but the God Emperor's own template. Direct from the source, made you a better psychic conduit. Silver purity seals beneath your skin, psychic wards embedded in flesh. 3 other aspirants survived training with you. Garan, Thane, Alex. You formed a squad because that's what survivors did. We protect each other became your motto. You didn't know why it resonated beyond tactical meaning, it just did. You learn what Grey Knights actually do. Other Space Marine chapters fight aliens and traitors. You fight demons, warp entities made of pure chaos that corrupt anything they touch. They twist minds just by being near them, turn loyal soldiers into monsters through exposure alone. This is why witnesses die. This is why secrecy matters. This is why weakness gets you executed. One corrupted Grey Knight could doom an entire world. You learn the doctrine. No Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos. Not one, not in 10,000 years. You believed it. You'd make sure it stayed true. First deployment, demon-infested Forge World. Industrial planet making weapons for the Imperium. You channeled psychic power through your sword, spoke banishment rites in languages that hurt to pronounce, felt the demon unravel as reality rejected it. Then watch your squad execute 200 Imperial Guardsmen who'd fought beside you. They'd seen Grey Knights use psychic powers, witnessed classified techniques, heard demon true names spoken aloud. Secrecy breach, standard protocol. You asked Garan if this was normal. He said witnesses are liabilities. You helped with the executions. Years later, deployment to clear a demon-corrupted transport. Routine work until you see a rat eyeing you. Almost following you. It ran when it saw you finally noticing. For some reason, you decide to follow it. You found the rat in the ventilation system, impossibly alive from warp exposure, still guarding its nest. You found the same necklace and felt nothing except a faint echo. This meant something once. You rationalized immediately, recovered purity charm worth keeping. You kept it as a focus, you didn't think about it again. You're a full Grey Knight now. Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus, the Inquisition's demon hunting division. Decades of deployments, major squad legendary. Demon purges across the Imperium, worlds saved before corruption could spread. You were noted for tactical brilliance, that buried cleverness keeping your brothers alive when other squads fell. Your minds linked during combat through the Egregore, psychic battle link that merged 4 minds into one. You felt Garon's targeting appear in your head like your own thought. Thane's shields wrapped around all 4 of you without asking. Alex knew where you'd strike before you moved. Perfect coordination. Then came Armageddon. Industrial hive world producing weapons for entire sectors, billions of workers, critical infrastructure the Imperium couldn't lose. Angron manifested, the demon primarch of the World Eaters, a corrupted demigod, 3 stories tall, leading an army of berserkers. Your chapter deployed in force. The battle took weeks. You spoke banishment rites while standing in corpse piles. Angron fell, dragged back into the warp screaming. Victory. The Forges survived. Then came the math. Billions witnessed demon manifestation. Billions saw Grey Knights fight. Exposure to greater demons leaves psychic taint in witnesses' minds. Corruption spreads like disease. One infected worker goes home, spreads it to his family. The infection grows until decades later the entire hive summons demons. The order? Purge the population. All of it. You spent months executing civilians. Efficient, methodical. The Space Wolves showed up halfway through, another loyalist Space Marine chapter. They called it genocide, started killing Grey Knights to stop it. The Space Wolves lost, the purge continued, the planet got repopulated later with fresh workers. Garan said approved doctrine works. Thane didn't talk for weeks, Alex kept asking if they'd been right. You didn't question it, you'd seen what demon corruption does. Then Thane started slowing down. You noticed during training, 0.3 seconds late, the Egregore link stuttered. That's how you knew he was done. Milliseconds in reaction time, but milliseconds kill in demon combat. He'd pushed too hard during a banishment, burned out his psychic reserves saving the squad. Apothecaries, the chapter's medical specialists, confirmed psychic exhaustion, not corruption. Recoverable with rest, temporary weakness. Temporary. Grey Knights don't do temporary. Verdict? Weekend Knights are liabilities. Honorable termination recommended. Thane knelt and accepted it. Garan froze, started saying something about brotherhood. You didn't freeze. Demons don't wait. You executed him clean. The Egregore link tore, like losing a limb you didn't know you had. Garan commented on your lack of hesitation. Hesitation kills. He understood that. Something in Garan shifted that day. Months later, he was seeing weakness everywhere, executing problems before they existed. During deployment, Alex showed fatigue and Garan killed him mid-operation without consultation. You realized Garan's paranoia was more dangerous than Thane's exhaustion ever was. The prognosticators agreed. Psychological imbalance, operational liability. You received the order. Garan was waiting in the training cages. He knew, asked you to do it before he failed, before he became the thing he'd been preventing. You raise your blade. For 1 microsecond, something flickered. This feels wrong. Conditioning crushed it. You executed Garan. You touched the necklace and felt nothing except familiar weight. You almost threw it away later, almost questioned why you kept it, but it helped you focus. That was reason enough. Your next deployment orders didn't include a planet name you recognized, just coordinates and threat assessment. Major Demon Incursion, Greater Demon of Tzeentch, Chaos God of Change and Lies, Chaos Cult Summoning Ritual in progress. Standard work, the kind of thing you'd done hundreds of times. You arrived to a world burning with purple lightning, arcing between clouds that moved wrong. The cult had opened a doorway using an old warp scar as anchor, decades old and festering. The scar registered on your psychic senses like a beacon, and when you scanned it deeper, the signature matched yours perfectly. The greater demon manifested, bird-shaped and crystalline, made of lies and broken futures. It spoke directly into your mind, mocking you for returning to the beacon you'd created decades ago. The wound you'd left when your power screamed from this place. Apparently, demons love monologuing. It's like their only personality trait besides murder. You'd never been here. The village was half destroyed, caught between cultist attacks and demon manifestation, but survivors were still fighting. Your hand went to the necklace unconsciously, the way it always did during psychic strain. You didn't understand the thought or where it came from or why these strangers would matter to you specifically. Now you do. Your training snapped into place like a vault slamming shut. Demonic emotional manipulation. The tug was false nostalgia planted by Tzeentch. The faces were warp-spawned illusions. The sense of connection was corruption attempting to find a way in. Your tactical analysis ran automatically. The civilians had been exposed to a greater demon's direct presence for hours. It also witnessed Grey Knights, which was a secrecy breach, and the warp scar originated from this exact location, which made them ground zero for contamination. They were vectors for taint, whether they knew it or not. So you would protect them from taint, from what they'd seen, from what they could become. You authorized the purge. The psychic tug vanished, just silence where something had been pulling before. Demon taint all along, emotional resonance trying to create an opening for corruption. Your squad channeled the rite of exorcism. You spoke the demon's true name, forbidden knowledge carved into your mind during the 666 rituals, and watched the creature unravel as reality rejected it. The warp scar sealed shut. Mission successful, threat eliminated, witnesses purged, secrecy maintained. The village burned behind you as standard purge protocols turned everything to ash. You stood watching the flames consume what was left and pulled the necklace from your armor. You walked toward the fire and held it over the flames. Let go. You watched it burn and felt nothing except the satisfaction of proper procedure followed. No time to dwell. Next deployment orders already waiting in the gunship's data slate. The Great Rift tore the galaxy in half 3 years ago. Black ships stopped arriving. No new psychers meant no new recruits. Chapter strength hemorrhaging. You hear they're raiding loyal chapters now, stealing their librarians, hiding the evidence. You'll probably get that order next, and you'll follow it, because you always do. Because this is all you are. There's nothing left.